Women have it easy. Just claim menopause and you can skip work and chores. My husband's words boiled my blood. I couldn't hide my fury at what he said. The changes in my body started after I turned 50. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with menopause. These 2 years, I've suffered from dizziness, palpitations, hot flashes, and various other symptoms. Even though I'm receiving treatment at the hospital, it's only providing symptom relief and not leading to a complete cure. All this time, my husband, living under the same roof, showed no understanding of my illness. Dizziness? Tiredness? Back pain? That happens to everyone as they age. But to label it menopause and skip work to lie in bed all day? Lucky you. As I lay unable to stand due to dizziness, these were his words. He maliciously interpreted my doctor-advised leave as skiving off for a trivial illness. He repeatedly hurled insults and sarcasm at my incurable condition. But this day was different. He looked down on me with a disdainful laugh. If you have time to show off your illness, at least do some housework, like a wife should. I'm Linda, 52 years old. I live with my husband, David, 3 years my senior. We met through a mutual acquaintance in our late 20s and hit it off immediately. We smoothly continued our relationship and married in our early 30s. Though we occasionally had minor quarrels, David was kind. We both worked hard and lived a peaceful life. We don't have kids, but have supported each other well as a couple. However, a few years ago, our marriage underwent significant changes. I was working full-time but am currently on leave. Due to ill health. Specifically, I started experiencing menopause symptoms in my late 40s, leading to frequent health issues. Initially, it was irregular menstrual cycles and sudden hot flashes, but the symptoms worsened over time, including severe palpitations and sleepless nights. Eventually, it even affected my mental health, causing irritability and depression. Menopause brings about various symptoms over approximately 10 years around the time of menstruation stopping. I had heard about it, but experiencing it myself was far more challenging than I imagined. My symptoms were severe, and on family advice, I started hospital treatment, but there's no cure. The doctor said menopause involves diverse symptoms, so treatment is usually symptomatic. I'm using prescribed medicine and herbal remedies, but they only temporarily alleviate symptoms. It became hard to continue working, so I took leave when I turned 50, 2 years ago. My company allows up to 3 years of leave, and soon I'll have to decide whether to return or resign. I don't want to quit, but there's no sign of my symptoms easing, so resignation looms as a frustrating reality. If I quit, I dread what David might say. Initially, David was concerned and attentive when I fell ill with menopause. He wasn't one to take the lead in household chores, but he used to care when I was unwell. I thought he was kind, but as my health issues dragged on, he started to look at me with annoyance. When I discussed taking a temporary leave from work, he didn't take it well. I don't quite get what's up with your health, but do you really need to take leave? You're not just planning to slack off at home, right? He said, which shocked me. Men also experience menopause, but David, despite his chronic condition, has rarely been unwell. He's always maintained good health, so he seems to view my prolonged unwellness as laziness. No matter how much I explain my symptoms, he never shows understanding, always saying, "What's the solution then? If one method doesn't work, find another. Why keep saying you can't heal? Find a way to get better." Continuing to work in my current state is tough. When I expressed my desire to take a leave of absence until my health stabilizes, David, as expected, got furious. However, when I told him that not only my boss, but also my colleagues and juniors, urged me to take a break, he reluctantly agreed, albeit with dissatisfaction. I had resolved to work harder on household chores while I was off work, but there were times when I suddenly felt unwell and couldn't even get up. Standing up made me dizzy, and even sitting down, I couldn't stop sweating, possibly due to hot flashes. Still, when I tried to force myself to vacuum, I was mercilessly struck by severe back pain. I ended up taking medication and enduring the pain, only doing household chores when I felt a bit better. But David still didn't understand. Aren't you better yet? What's the point of going to the doctor? As expected, he gradually started treating me coldly. You know, don't be so dependent all the time. If you're on leave and staying at home all day, why don't you at least finish all the household chores during the day? You can't be feeling sick from morning till night. Coming home to no greeting, dinner that's just cut and cooked, what are you doing at home? David complained more than once when he returned from work. His exasperated sighs and attitude were shocking to me. Over the weekend, when I was feeling ill and lying down, he yelled, "How long are you going to sleep? At least do the laundry." David's sarcasm and complaints increased day by day, and there was no more consideration or concern from him. While his terrible attitude hurt me, I also grew increasingly anxious, wondering when my symptoms would heal or if they ever would. However, it was truly a blessing that my mother-in-law, Barbara, and my sister-in-law, Emily, who live in the same town, showed understanding of my condition and occasionally offered advice. Barbara is over 80 years old but has strong legs and is a very lively person who speaks her mind. My father-in-law has already passed away, and she lives with Emily and her husband. It was Barbara and Emily who first suggested I go to the hospital and even said I should consider taking a leave of absence if my condition was too severe. I'm really grateful to them, as both my parents have already passed away, for being so caring about my menopause symptoms. One day, David told me, for Mom's birthday, we're gonna have a dinner party at our place next weekend. In David's family, it's been a tradition since his childhood to have big dinner parties for family birthdays. Since marrying him, I've participated every year. Depending on the year, we've either gone out for meals or had a party at his parents' house, but this year, we decided to have Barbara's birthday celebration at our house. Naturally, I was in charge of the cooking. Barbara and Emily were supposed to come over in the evening, and Emily's husband couldn't make it due to work. "Make sure you're in good shape for the day," David said, glaring at me sharply. "I won't tolerate it if it's like last year." "I understand," I replied, as I could only nod in front of David's assertive attitude. The thing is, last year, I felt ill during Barbara's birthday and missed the party at my in-laws. David seemed to think he was embarrassed by this. I still vividly remember being harshly scolded by him when he returned home, which was really tough and made me cry. So this time, I want to make sure I'm in good health for the dinner party, just as David said. However, if it were a condition that could be fixed just by wanting it, I wouldn't have been suffering for years. Hoping for even a slightly better condition, I started preparing little by little. Barbara is going to be 85 on her next birthday. Wanting to show my gratitude for all she has done for me, I vowed to put my best effort into cooking dinner for everyone that day. Since we're hosting the in-laws, there's a lot to do before the day, besides meal preparation. David is somewhat prideful, so I knew he wouldn't be satisfied unless the house was cleaned from corner to corner. I took a few days to thoroughly clean the house, all the while consulting my health. David never helps with the housework, just relaxing in the living room, but I've gotten used to that. I know some younger men nowadays do housework, but in David's generation, it's considered the wife's job. I never expected him to help, since he thinks I just loaf around the house all day. The day before the party, I finished shopping for the dinner menu and went to bed early, praying that I would wake up with mild symptoms. However, on the day of the dinner party, I woke up with terrible headaches and dizziness. When I tried to get up from bed, my vision became all wobbly, and I had to close my eyes. Then, I heard the intense pounding of my heart and was struck with a headache so severe it felt like my head was being hammered. It was one of the worst symptoms I've experienced recently. Nevertheless, I somehow managed to get out of bed, only to be greeted by David's loud TSK from above. Realizing I was unable to prepare breakfast, he grabbed only his wallet and phone, and headed towards the door. He said indifferently, "I'm gonna grab some food. Then, because I feel sick being around you, I'll head over to Mom's place early. Make sure you have dinner ready and greet them properly," and he left the house. Indeed, David was supposed to pick up Barbara and Emily today, but showing up so early in the morning must have been inconvenient for them. His thoughtless words hurt, but I couldn't afford to stay upset. I just drank some jelly drink and took my medicine, lying in the living room until my symptoms settled. But even in the afternoon, my condition hardly improved. The medicine eased the headache, but I felt dizzy and unsteady whenever I tried to get up. I needed to start preparing dinner soon, but I couldn't get my body to move as I wanted. I stood in the kitchen for short periods, taking breaks in between, but time was running out. Feeling desperate, I tried calling David but couldn't reach him. I sent him a message, but he didn't reply. Eventually, it was 5 p.m., still not fully ready, and David returned home with Barbara and Emily. David entered the living room and looked at me sitting on the kitchen floor with a puzzled expression. "You didn't even greet Mom and the others when they arrived. Is dinner ready?" "It's not even set up," he said, and I was at a loss for words. I had made a salad with torn leafy vegetables and tomatoes. But beyond that, I had hardly prepared anything else. Anticipating another scolding, my heart raced with anxiety, and I struggled to breathe, but I decided to apologize and explain the truth. "David, I'm sorry. This is all I could manage." "I'm really sorry, but could you order something tasty for the main dish?" "I'm sorry," I said. David's face turned red, and his demeanor changed drastically. "Don't play the sick card now. This is an important dinner, and Mom was really looking forward to it. And you're just trying to embarrass me again like last year?" David was furiously angry, scolding me harshly. "It's not like that. I'm not trying to play the sick card." "You are. It's pathetic that at your age, you can't even manage your own health. You're inconveniencing us all because of your issues." David didn't listen to me and continued to berate me. "Then why didn't you answer the phone? I sent a message saying to eat out. I even sent another email 3 minutes ago asking you to order something. Why are you so insistent on eating at home when you do nothing?" I exploded with pent-up frustration, shouting back loudly. Each word felt like a blow to the head with a metal bat. My vision was so blurred I could hardly see David's face properly. I couldn't hear anything over my own voice and pounding heart, and I was sweating profusely from the heat. The symptoms I had been managing with medication were now coming on strong, and I regretted it a bit, but I couldn't keep silent with David. When my vision finally cleared a bit and I caught sight of David, he was standing there with his mouth agape in a foolish expression. Then our eyes met, and he glared at me, pointing his finger strongly. "What's with that tone of voice? Pretending to be sick and hiding in the house, not doing any housework, you lazy." And then snapping back when pointed out, "You're the worst. Such a wife is unfit, I'm sick of supporting you. If you can't do the housework, then let's get a divorce," he yelled loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Despite my desperate pleas, nothing seemed to affect David. After years together, the fact that David could suggest divorce without hesitation made me feel so miserable that I was on the verge of tears. I had no choice but to agree to the divorce. Just as I was about to speak my agreement, I heard light footsteps. But David, in his rage, didn't seem to notice. "What's the big deal about menopause anyway? Being tired, having stiff shoulders, that's normal for our age. Dizziness and headaches can't be that bad if you're taking medicine. You just want to lie in bed all day, don't you?" Then someone tapped David on the shoulder from behind. It was Emily. With an anger I had never seen before, Emily swung her right hand as David turned around, striking him hard across the cheek. David, hit by a powerful right straight from a 60-year-old woman, fell to the floor, looking up at Emily, bewildered, not understanding what had happened. "Hey, sis. Why did you hit me all of a sudden?" As he rubbed his cheek, puzzled, Emily glared at him sharply. "And you, what's with that attitude? Have you been treating Linda like this for years? Deciding the severity of her illness without being a doctor and berating your wife, you should be ashamed," she yelled furiously. David, always trying to look good in front of his family, had never treated me so coldly. Even when he was berating me with disdain as I suffered from dizziness, he became caring about my health and made coffee himself as soon as Emily visited. I had confided in Barbara and Emily about my illness, but never about David's behavior. I was worried that speaking ill of David, their blood relative, might make them resent me. They might not believe me, as they hadn't seen how he treated me. Even if they did believe and sympathize, I feared how David would retaliate after they confronted him. But now, seeing Emily's actions, I wondered if my thinking had been wrong.
What do you mean? It's Mom's birthday party today, and I wanted her to enjoy it. But she ruined the dinner by not cooking. Isn't she to blame?
David stood up and pointed at me, blaming me further. Then Barbara, who had come into the living room with Emily, glared at David.
Are you saying Linda ruined the dinner? That's just your opinion, isn't it? From what I've heard, Linda did as much as she could despite being in pain. When she realized she couldn't finish in time, she contacted you to change the location or order something. I don't want to be celebrated by someone who's unwell. And I'm certainly not happy to be celebrated by a son who only complains after pushing everything onto his sick wife.
Barbara spoke firmly to David. Then Emily asked, "Did you just leave Linda alone when you knew she was unwell and come to our house?"
Well, what could I have done? There are many things you could have done, like helping with housework or being considerate of her condition. Didn't I tell you to be more caring toward Linda when she first started feeling unwell? You just found it bothersome, didn't you?
David was at a loss for words, cornered by Emily's sharp comments. It seemed Emily had told David to be more attentive to me after I started feeling unwell, but David's behavior made it clear he hadn't heeded her words. Why do you and Mom always take her side? Menopause isn't even a real illness. Being tired or having palpitations, that happens to everyone as they age. Women who just want to be lazy call it an illness and make themselves out to be patients. David continued to justify himself. Emily sighed and began to explain.
You might not know this, David, but I also suffered from severe menopause symptoms. It's only recently that they've settled down, but they were so bad that I quit my job 10 years ago. You're saying that a disease that forced me to quit my job isn't real?
Hearing Emily's words, David froze, looking stunned. I had talked to Emily soon after my menopause symptoms started. She told me that she had suffered from menopause at the same age as me and had to temporarily stop working before eventually resigning. She didn't want to quit her job, but there was no sign of recovery, so after consulting with her family, she decided to prioritize her health. I knew Emily had quit her job around the age of 50, but I didn't know the reason until she told me. Thinking back, I realized that I hadn't seen her around that time. We mainly communicated by email because she couldn't meet due to her poor health.
It was really tough back then. I thought it might never get better. But Michael, my husband, told me to quit my job and take it easy, Emily said.
Michael, Emily's husband, is 5 years younger than her. His work involves irregular hours and night shifts, so he couldn't attend the dinner. I don't see him often, but I remember him as a kind man who always asks about my health. Emily, having such a compassionate husband, desperately appealed to David.
Linda isn't your servant, you know. Shouldn't a husband be more caring towards his wife?
I'm sorry, sis. I knew you were unwell back then, but I didn't realize it was for that reason.
David replied, sounding defensive. But Emily's expression remained stern.
Right now, it's not me you should be apologizing to, but Linda,
Emily stated firmly. David, looking frustrated, turned his face towards me. David loves Emily, so he generally can't go against her words. Eventually, he seemed to give in. I'm sorry. Being scolded by my sister has been a wake-up call. From now on, I'll help Linda and let's get along well, he said, looking into my eyes with a sincere tone. I thought he finally understood and felt relieved, thinking of forgiving him, when I heard, wait a moment. It was Barbara who intervened. Tired from standing, she approached the sofa with Emily's support and sat down next to me. Then, locking eyes with me, she said sternly, Linda, don't take David's words seriously. You should get a divorce quickly. What? What do you mean? I asked, surprised. Barbara began to share a past experience.
Actually,
I suffered from similar symptoms at your age. There was no name for it like menopause back then. From what you've told me, I think I also had menopause. I've mentioned this before, haven't I?
I nodded slightly at Barbara's words. When Barbara was about my age, menopause wasn't widely recognized. And there were no treatments, let alone understanding from others. Barbara chuckled with a troubled smile and pointed at David.
David used to say terrible things to me when I was suffering back then. It was around the time before he married you, I believe. He was still living at home, and he would say things like, "Hurry up and make dinner. How long will you sleep? You're the mother. Stop pretending to be sick," and such unkind words.
Barbara's face looked pained, as if recalling those difficult times.
Is that true?
I asked David, wanting to believe in him. He awkwardly turned his face away without denying anything, indicating that what Barbara said was true. Barbara looked down painfully and said, "My late husband, David's father, got angry at David's behavior back then and hit him. When he was severely scolded by his father, David said the exact same thing, that he had a wake-up call. Indeed, after that, David stopped saying anything to me. That's because he soon married you and moved out. But Linda, he treated you badly, didn't he? So, David hasn't changed at all. Even after decades, he has no understanding of someone else's illness." She spoke calmly, dismissing David's words as mere excuses.
No way! Just wait a minute, I won't do it anymore, believe me.
David tried to intervene, but Emily grabbed his arm to stop him.
I saw it back then too. That's why I hit you like Dad did. Remember, after Dad scolded you, you were crying and apologized to Mom, saying you wouldn't do it again, that you had a wake-up call, and that it was your fault. But now, you're doing the same thing to Linda that you did to Mom. Asking to be believed after doing the same thing twice is just too convenient. There's no way we can believe you,"
Emily admonished, and David bit his lip in frustration. As he fell silent, Barbara grabbed my shoulders and said, "That's why you need to divorce David and escape quickly. Otherwise, you'll continue to suffer. Now, with my daughter and me here, is your chance. If it's just the two of you, he'll never admit his faults. He might even get angry at you for embarrassing him in front of his parents." I felt sad to hear such words from his own mother. The thought of divorcing at this age was daunting, but hearing Barbara's story made me feel like I couldn't go on with David. I had endured his treatment, believing that once my symptoms eased, we could return to living happily as before. But it would likely just be a brief respite before things got worse again. I also felt rising anger at learning David had verbally abused Barbara in the past. Suppressing my ongoing dizziness, I stood up and, looking straight at David, expressed my intention to divorce. David shook off Emily's hand and shouted, "What, so everyone's against me now?" Everyone in the room looked at David with cold eyes. Faced with such gazes even from his family, David turned red with rage. "Fine, I get it. If that's what you all say, then I'll agree to the divorce," he said, angrily consenting to the divorce. The dinner party was cancelled, and Barbara and Emily went home. David stayed at a hotel. Our divorce proceeded without any dispute over property division and was finalized smoothly. Afterward, I focused on recuperating from my condition, living alone after separating from David. About half a year later, I received a call from David, whom I hadn't been in contact with at all. Since leaving him, I had moved into an apartment and was living alone, regularly visiting the hospital for my treatment. As expected, the call was filled with David's selfish demands. I had been feeling better recently without any stress, but the call from David gave me a bad feeling. He had a pre-existing condition that, according to him, worsened after our divorce and him living alone. Yet, David always boasted about perfectly managing his own health. He even used that to insult me when I was unwell, calling me lazy for not getting better sooner. Why did it get like this? You said you could manage your health perfectly, right? I retorted, although I knew the reason. David's idea of managing his health was shallow, just choosing what to eat from the meals I prepared, considering balance. He never had to cook from scratch because I always planned the meals with his health in mind. Moreover, since he never did any household chores, his living standards plummeted over the past 6 months. His diet consisted of convenience store meals and retorts, only showering, not cleaning, which inevitably led to his deteriorating health. I won't be able to live like this. That's why I want you to take care of me. It's been half a year, your illness must be cured by now, he said without any remorse. Apparently, he first turned to Emily and Barbara, but Emily was busy caring for Barbara and couldn't help. Reluctantly contacting me as a last resort, David pleaded. Though I wanted to refuse, he was, after all, my husband for many years. I thought of ignoring him, but David said, then at least come and look at the album I found in the closet. If you don't want it, I'll throw it away. I hesitated, thinking it might be old photos, including good times with David and Barbara's family. Despite being disillusioned now, our relationship was good back then, and there were photos with Barbara and Emily. I decided to go and pick out my part of the photos from our former home. The house we lived in until half a year ago was dirtier than before, possibly due to neglect. Empty convenience store meal containers were left on the table, making me frown involuntarily. Without you, I don't have time to clean. It's hard to move when I'm feeling unwell, David excused himself without being asked. He looked unexpectedly well, despite claiming to be unwell. Moreover, despite seeking care in anticipation of worsening health, what David really wanted was cleaning, laundry, and meal preparation. It seemed like he just wanted a housekeeper. After some hesitation, I replied, "You don't look injured and seem perfectly fine. Why don't you stop slacking off and take care of yourself?" At this, David narrowed his eyes displeasedly and retorted, "You know my illness affects my internal organs and nerves, right? Don't judge just by appearances. I'm really suffering, and you dare accuse me of slacking off." He spat those words out. I just stared at him coldly in response, and he started to stutter. Suddenly, David stopped. And, taking a deep breath,
I was wrong to say that to you when you were suffering. I'm truly sorry and have reflected deeply. I won't do it again, so please.
Before he could finish, I firmly declined.
Sorry, but I can't take care of you. I'm still dealing with menopause myself, and I can't trust your repentance.
Then, a desperate David clung to me, seemingly without any concern for how he appeared.
Please, I could be hospitalized at any time due to my worsening condition. Medication alone isn't enough, proper diet management is essential, and I'm in trouble without you. Please, I'm begging you.
While David seemed genuinely remorseful, I remembered what Barbara and Emily had told me about his past actions.
They say he only apologizes deeply when he wants to blame you for not forgiving him.
Recalling her words, I shook my head slowly. I was already overwhelmed with my own issues and not in a position to take care of someone else. If I went back to living with and caring for David, the stress would likely exacerbate my menopause symptoms again. I couldn't go back to square one after finally starting to feel better. It's impossible.
If you really need care, use a caregiving or helper service.
I told him, explaining these options. I made it clear again that I couldn't provide care and had no intention of living together in the future, then returned to my life. Later, as my symptoms settled, I resumed work after a long leave of absence. I started returning to work gradually. There was a time when I contemplated resigning, but now that I need to live on my own, I have to earn my living expenses independently. Additionally, having always found fulfillment in my job, despite the break of 2 years and a few months, I found it enjoyable once I started working again. I had no intention of reconciling with David or remarrying anyone else at the moment. However, I still kept in touch with David's family, occasionally meeting them for meals. I heard that the traditional family dinners, a long-standing custom in David's family, were discontinued after this incident. Furthermore, David apparently quit his job for reasons unknown. He claimed it was to focus on his treatment, but his visit frequency to the doctor and dietary habits hadn't changed. He had some savings from early retirement, so he seemed financially stable for the time being. Nevertheless, he appeared to be living in fear of an uncertain future due to his illness. As for me, I plan to continue cherishing my health and living a fulfilling life for the rest of my days.